But don't you know the guy upstairs left us years ago? So there ain't no fake except the one you make, and there ain't no hell except the shit you take every day. So don't tell me life doesn't hurt, and then you don't need the people cause you've got your church. You gotta take your head out of the sky because there ain't nothing.
I think we're actually live. Welcome to the Atheist Experience. We're supposed to be live. I think we're live. We're doing what we can. We're streaming now. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me is Jeff D.
Hi.
And a moth. Look at the moth.
Yes. With any luck, he will fly into the shot.
Yeah, and there's a parrot in the bathroom that's screaming. We had some minor technical difficulties, but y'all don't care about that. We're late. We're getting the show started, and we'll go the full time.
I thought about bringing my dog. That would have been awesome. You'd have a full menagerie.
Yes, that would have been awesome. That's exactly the word that I would have used to describe that. So we are here at Dillahunty International Studios on the new Manatee couch.
Oh, is this we're inaugurating the new couch right now?
Yeah.
This is the first time?
For the first first and only show that'll be done on this.
Because this is the last time here? Really?
Starting next week, we'll be back in the studio. It's October 18th, Sunday, 4:30. We're expecting it to go seamlessly and perfect. The best show ever with all new stuff, and everything will work right out of the box, no problem.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
We had nonprofits yesterday, and we'll have another one next Saturday. Yesterday's guest was PZ Myers, and of course he posted it on his blog, so I guess the downloads for that have just gone through the roof. Although we're having some problems with the audio, I'm aware of that. It's got to do with the MP3 encoding, and you don't care about any of that either. I'll just fix what I can. So welcome. The Atheist Experience Live. Jeff's with me here. We even have other people in the room who are wondering why I'm mentioning that.
Because we're not going to move the camera.
Yeah, it's been
There is, in fact, nobody behind the camera at this exact moment.
Joe's actually working really hard. This is what is this show, Jeff? Do you remember?
The Atheist Experience?
Is it the Atheist Experience?
Yeah. It's not the nonprofits. Nonprofits, there's no camera. That's how you can tell.
Then this show is the one that's sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin, which is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and separation of church and state.
Right. This is the one.
This is the one. The other one is also sponsored by them, but I don't do the spiel for that one.
Dennis does that spiel.
Yes, he does. And a wonderful job with interesting and unusual intros every time we do it. So you can find out more about the ACA by going to atheist-community.org. You can find out more about this show by going to atheist-experience.com. And you can also watch the last episode up there at that page. You can dig through the archives to watch older episodes that are being stored at Blip TV and Google and other resources as well. And if you go to the Atheist Community website, atheist-community.org, you can find out more about the organization that sponsors us, the nonprofits, the lecture series, the happy hours. You can check out the calendar of events. We just had a bat cruise last month, which was awesome, and we had a lot of fun, like 75, 80 people or something. It was a packed house.
Or a boat.
Boat. Houseboat.
It's not a houseboat.
They had a bathroom.
I've been on it. It's not a houseboat.
Okay, they don't have a kitchen, so it's not a house or houseboat. So I'm waiting for a thumbs up from Joe. Is everything working so they can hear how stupid I sound when we're confused and running late? So
everything's going to be fine, Matt.
Joe's
relax.
Joe's doing everything he can, and he'll get a caller ready for us really soon. They're already queued up in order. I know there's some people that have been waiting for the final week of Skype calls here at Dillahunty International Studios, and I think we're pretty much just going to go straight to calls.
I think we should do that on account of I didn't bring anything particularly prepared to talk about this time.
It's good stuff. So in addition to this program and the nonprofits, the ACA has a number of other activities. You can find out more about that at the website. The purpose of this show is to give the public an awareness of atheists, what we believe, what we don't believe, promote dialogue, discussion, have people call in, explain what they believe and why, talk about it. We don't necessarily have to stick to a particular topic, and we may have more atheist callers than theist callers lately with Skype, since we're not actually broadcasting live on TV in the Austin area. So We're grateful to hear from all of you. We really appreciate the fans of the show around the world who have added us on Skype. I would give you the instructions, but it's kind of moot at this point. If we continue to use Skype, once we get in the studio, we'll have instructions posted and available. Who do we got?
Alicia from Australia.
Cool.
Call to,
So the quick thing, for those of you who are waiting, you just send a message on Skype to Atheist TV with your name, your location, and what you want to talk about, and then we'll call you when we're ready to put you on.
Okay.
Is she on? Alicia in Australia.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. How are you?
Oh, great. I'm great. First I want to say that you guys are awesome. I've been watching on YouTube and you actually helped me figure out that I'm actually an atheist. And
Oh.
I'm actually really excited to be talking to you.
Great. Thank you very much. I have some friends down in Australia as well. Some of them came up for TAM 7. I'm hoping to eventually get down there one day. We'll make a big party out of it.
Awesome. I have a question for you. I've been reading up on apologetics a lot lately, and one argument that I'm sort of not sure how to think about is the argument from personal experience. And I know a lot of people from of different religions and people who I trust for various reasons, to be honest, and people seem to have religious experiences. I don't necessarily believe that when they say that God is talking to them, that God is talking to them, but it's something that I think I understand because I've also had them myself. I have temporal lobe epilepsy, and so sometimes I hallucinate as a result of having seizures. So it's easy for me to sort of be able to deal with my own personal religious experiences. But how would you address the argument from personal experience? How would you, if you were having, if someone was having religious experiences themselves, how would they, how could they verify that? How do you deal with that?
Okay. Go ahead.
Shall I? Well, the last thing you said, how would they verify that? That's, I think, the key. Because things that just happen inside your own head, there's no independent verification possible. Now, so that makes it problematic, and I think the things that I say to people who make claims like that to me are, well, I don't doubt that you have had an experience. The question is, what was its actual nature? We know for a fact that there are seizures, that there are hallucinations, that there are misinterpretations of data, and so there's a lot of other things that might have been before we even get to the question of lying. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So what I say is that look, that's fine. You experience something weird and you're interpreting it to be your God, but other people all over the planet have similar experiences and interpret those experiences to be their God. So it's not at all clear that it's definitely yours. That's just your interpretation of it. The thing you need to do if you want to prove that your God exists is you're going to have to compile some evidence from from outside of personal experience.
Yeah, and to kind of add a little bit to what Jeff was saying, in some cases it depends on specifically what they're claiming. In much the same way that if somebody claimed they were abducted by aliens without any external evidence to corroborate it, I can only say, okay, I don't believe that that's what happened. You, as Jeff said, I believe that you had an experience, or I'm willing to accept that you had some experience, but to attribute a cause to it, I don't see the justification for that. But there's an exception, I think, in some religious claims. And this is because you need to look at not only what they're actually saying with regard to that experience, but what they're adding to it. And if somebody says, I've had a personal experience with a God, and while you haven't necessarily had that experience, you should also believe it, and here's what God wants you to know. Well, I'm fine dismissing all of that out of hand, but I think you can also address, depending on their claim, the absurdity of this. Dawkins made a comment at the AAI convention that you have a God who is supposedly intelligent, and one of the best ways that he has been able to find to communicate with people is to have them babble incessantly, scream and yell and flail around on the ground. And, Pentecostal churches where they're speaking in tongues and doing this. That's, I don't think it's unreasonable for people to say that's patently absurd. If this
it's like the space aliens who have visited us from many, many light years away and can't think of a better way to communicate than to squash down some wheat in a beautiful pattern.
Yeah,
what's that all about?
It's absolutely that. And if their claim is such that it entails other factors that render it absurd, then I think it's fine to not only do I not accept your claim, but I believe that your claim is outright wrong or mistaken, and here's why, and go into those details. But by and large, when somebody tells me that they have a personal experience that for them justifies it, okay, fine, but would you at least admit that there's no reason why I should also believe absent that experience?
Right. I mean, they will tend to bring up the insinuation that by not believing them, you are claiming that they are liars, right? Because that is an emotional ploy. Once they've had this personal internal experience, not having you not accept it, they can spin that emotionally to try to get you to back down and say, well, okay, I don't think you're a liar. But lying isn't even an issue, right? It's not a question of whether they're lying. It's a question of whether their interpretation of their experience matches up with reality. Is that helpful?
That is. Can I add another question about that?
Sure.
I also wonder about. I was reading, I forget whose blog it was, but someone was talking about an imaginary friend they had that would basically give them guidance. And I wonder about whether personal religious experiences might actually, whether or not they're actually real religious experience might actually have some kind of usefulness in, giving the subconscious mind a way for people to tell themselves things that they need to tell themselves, and I guess without talking to themselves. Or what do you think of that sort of idea?
I think you may possibly be right. It's really difficult to try and figure out exactly the reasons behind all this, and there's such a broad range of experiences that I wouldn't want to sum them up. But I do have an idea. I have no data to support this. This is just something I've thought about, which falls in line with what you're talking about. We all have, to some extent, a reliance on inference and induction when making decisions. We expect the world to be pretty much the same tomorrow as it was today. And we don't necessarily think things out every time we want to make a decision. We rely on our gut, which is not really our stomach thinking. That's just a way of us saying we're more intuitive, that we are, somebody tells me something and I don't necessarily need to go investigate it. I can just kind of get the gut feel as to whether or not this is true. I think our sense of morality and conscience also fall into that. And it may be the case that what some people are experiencing or doing is having the experience of a conscience or an intuitive leap and overplaying it to themselves and attributing an external source to that. I looked around for my keys, and then I prayed, and then I found my keys. The prayer, or it may not have had much to do with it at all. The attribution to a higher power may not have had anything to do with it at all. But somebody got to a point where they reached a conclusion or came to a decision that they found to be beneficial, and then attributed it elsewhere. And then I think that just kind of builds up. So there may be an element of that.
Yeah, I have nothing to do with it.
Okay, I wasn't sure if that made sense or not.
That makes sense to me.
Okay.
Thanks very much. It was really great to talk to you.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your call.
Bye.
All right. Joe can line up another caller for us. And as a quick reminder, when the show's over, around 6 or 7 minutes after 6 or so, whenever we decide to quit, we've been getting together to go to dinner. And this will be the last week that we'll be going to the Pluckers by the Lakeline Mall. And we'll get there around 6:30, maybe a little bit afterwards. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to that dinner and to any of the ACA events. As long as you're not coming down to preach, proselytize, or provoke, you can come down and have a good time, which is mostly what we end up doing. I mean, this isn't church. This isn't a cult. It's basically a bunch of people who said, I kind of like to hang out with other people without feeling like I need to sit quietly by and keep my mouth shut and smile and nod because they all want to attribute everything to a god, or talk about how the country's in ruin because we've lost our way with regard to God, things like that. We got somebody lined up, Joe?
Yeah, give me a sec. Michael Egger from Seattle.
Michael from Seattle.
And I'm calling right now.
Oh, Joe's calling it now. How you been?
Me? Fine. So I've got a bit of a sinus issue right now, so I apologize to everyone out there for my my wonderful deep radio voice.
So we got Michael from Seattle, is it?
Yes.
How you
Michael.
doing?
I'm doing okay. My question has to do mainly with how we deal with between the moderate Christians, moderate religious people, and the more fundamentalist people.
Huh?
Normally, when we talk about issues, we end up talking about the extreme end of things, but we end up, by default, it seems we lump in the rest of religious people when that's not always the case. There are reasonable, to a degree, reasonable moderates out there.
Okay. When do you may I jump in right away?
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
don't think that's true. I think that that the religious beliefs are just as irrational at every point in the spectrum, right? They're more dangerous when we're talking about fundamentalists, but they're just as irrational whether you're talking about an extreme liberal Christian who only believes some of the stuff in the Bible, and a fundamentalist who believes every word. The beliefs themselves are just as irrational. And for me, my issue with Christians who are not fundamentalist is what they do is they provide cover by making it socially acceptable to believe all that stuff in the religion in the first place, which the fundamentalists then take and run with. So that's my take on the issue. Now, are they different? Sure, but as far as whether it's worth raising a big question mark when a moderate Christian speaks versus when a fundamentalist speaks, makes no difference to me.
And while I'm almost completely on board with Jeff, I think I might phrase it a little bit different about equally irrational. It'd be like somebody believes one irrational thing versus somebody who believes 10 irrational things. Each of the things are all irrational.
Agreed.
But the guy who believes 10 things is more...
Quantity is different.
Yeah.
Quality is identical.
But what you were addressing was the frequency with which we perhaps paint them with a broad brush. This is something that I've struggled with off and on over the years that we've been doing the show. because I try to be as fair as possible. Don and I have had discussions where he'll bring up something from the Bible or something from Christianity in particular that I don't think represents any significant portion of the population or common understanding, and I'll note those things. And I try to be as careful as I can about saying, for example, when I talk about believers threatening people with hell, I freely acknowledge that there are plenty of Christians, plenty of people who label themselves as Christians, who don't believe in a hell, who in any sense. And there are a number of different types of hell beliefs within Christianity, where there's annihilation theory, where you're not punished, you just cease to exist. And then there's hell for a temporary period of time, and it's just mostly bad. And then there's the eternal torment and stuff that I think is much more prevalent than a lot of people would like to admit. However, when it comes to painting them with a brush, not my fault, not my problem. If Christianity has 1,000 different denominations that call themselves Christian, they can't agree on any single issue of doctrine. There's every point of doctrine is objected to by some denomination that calls themselves Christian, right up to who Jesus was. Was he divine? Was he wholly divine? Was he man, half man? Was he some conglomeration? And when you leave a group to form a splinter group, but keep the name, that's your problem. I'm not you, obviously, but
No.
that is, they have to bear the onus for that. If they don't like being painted with the same broad brush as the people whose beliefs they don't share, maybe they should choose a different name and stand up and say, we're tired of being lumped in with those folks over there who are dangerous, who are harmful to society, and so we are going to call ourselves something else, and that way delineate.
That excuse me, that actually makes a lot of sense, and that's I wish moderates would stand up more and say we're not part of these people, and get rid of the make the fundamentalists shut up more.
Yeah.
But it also creates a problem when we're trying to get a common goal, like getting creationism out of schools. We don't want to piss off the moderates that are for getting it out of schools. But at the same time, we got to say these things against the fundamentalists.
I don't. While strategically it might be nice if we could get moderates on our side, I've just noticed over the years that's really hard to do. Because, I've personally experienced being snubbed by not moderate Christians, but liberal Christians who still can't deal with the notion of working side by side with atheists.
Yeah.
Because the core thing is still there, the core idea that they have hold of the truth and that there's there's something wrong with those people that don't. So while it's, strategically it makes a lot of sense, I don't know that it's all that practical. It's worth trying, but if they won't come on board, or if they're bothered by the fact that, that when I say things like, ultimately I think the things you believe and the things they believe are equally crazy, I'm not going to stop stating my opinion just to achieve a strategic goal, necessarily.
It's kind of like saying that science should soften itself in order to accept, the more moderate supernaturalist views. No, it doesn't. If you want to be part of the scientific community, you get involved and you submit to the rigors and strictures of science. And if you want to be involved in a reality-based community, sorry, it's like PZ said yesterday on the show. We're happy to work alongside you, but you have to realize that when you say something that's stupid, you're going to get filleted alive.
Okay.
It's not about intolerance of people. It's about intolerance of ideas and beliefs and the credulity.
It's about having standards.
Yeah. I will say, though, that you don't even have to go, you were talking about being snubbed by moderates and liberal
Yeah.
theists. That's not the case with all of them. Reverend Barry,
No,
Reverend
not
Barry
all
Lynn.
of them. I'm just saying it's
It's
happened.
not even the case with all fundamentalists. There are some fundamentalists who wouldn't snub us because they're so fundamentalist that they view us in a completely different light. But you don't even have to go that far. We've been snubbed by, I have been snubbed by elitist agnostics who think that it is absurd for us to use the atheist label and for us to challenge the claims of religious, because they are convinced that nobody can know this stuff. You're just, you are just as bad as them, and you guys are all bluster and talking about nonsense. And it drives me crazy because on the one hand, you have people who say, I believe that this is true, and therefore I'm going to legislate it onto everybody. And when I say, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that, you've got somebody who says, well, you just don't know. No, I do know. I know that much. I know what I feel is right and wrong with regard to reality. But
Okay. Well, that's it for my questions. Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Thanks for the show.
thank you.
Thank you for calling. I want to go back and amend something I said earlier. In fact, a very valid argument can be made that liberal Christianity is more crazy than fundamentalist Christianity. Because if you believe that there is an all-powerful entity who inspired the Bible, it's actually somewhat crazier to think that you then have the freedom to pick and choose. And fundamentalists are aware of this. I mean, when they say, hey, we have to take it all literally because otherwise we're denying the power
Right.
of God, they're absolutely right.
Yeah, when Ken Ham sits there and says, well, if you get rid of Genesis, why not get rid of anything else in there?
He's absolutely
he's
right.
on the nose. And my answer is, I did.
Yeah.
Who's next?
Jason from Austin.
Jason from Austin, calling in on Skype. I should have just given you my home number.
Hey, Matt, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, great. This is kind of a response to one of the posts on the blog.
Mhm.
Y'all posted that Conservapedia is asking if you can rewrite the Bible in a more conservative fashion.
Yeah.
And so Stephen Colbert heard about that, and he wanted to have everybody write in and rewrite the Bible with him as one of the biblical characters.
Wow.
That's
So
hilarious.
I was wondering,
It'll
if you could
probably
rewrite
happen.
the Bible, who would you choose as Stephen Colbert's biblical character?
Colbert? I'd put him in the Moses role, I think.
Moses.
I think I'd put Colbert in the Moses. Colbert, the character.
King David. King David.
See, I was thinking the Virgin Mary, but that was just me.
Oh,
You just want to see Colbert in a wig.
that's, well, if he was King David, he'd have a wig too. kind
Oh,
of.
that's true.
Which is the first thing that I thought was funny. And Moses, but it's a wig and a beard thing.
Or it might be hilarious to wait a minute. Is David and Goliath that David? Is that King David too?
Yes.
That's just young King David.
Yes.
Yeah, that's who I see him as. That would
taking
be
down
hilarious.
giants, and then stealing brides from his military leaders, and then sending them off to die so that he
Except
can
it
keep their
wouldn't
wife.
be a battle involving a sling. It would be them sitting down at a table and having a conversation, and him just being incredibly rude and unfair to the giant. Okay,
Cool.
that was
All right.
funny. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Well, while Joe's lining up the next caller, I'll remind everybody that we'll be back in the studio next Sunday, which means we'll be probably returning to Threadgills, I believe is the plan that most of us had agreed on, which we'll find out for sure next week. And we'll be taking calls at a telephone number, which we'll put out on the air once we're on. I don't think we're going to be taking Skype calls, at least not the first week.
Next week, hopefully.
In the future, we may have the ability to take Skype calls as well as telephone calls. So we'll continue with the same account, and you can add that, and we'll do that.
Okay. First update question about the spoon is
It's still a spoon. I think it's over there. So, no, it's in a basket on the side of my bed. So
What's it
all I
supposed
can
to turn
say,
into?
a fork.
A fork. Okay.
All I can say is that it was still a spoon last time I checked, and I'll be happy to check again after the show, and you can ask again next week. it's still a spoon. I so want the tick to come.
This is the
rushing across.
So this is the challenge where people are supposed to pray for it to turn into a fork?
Yes, because this guy is convinced that there's a God, because on several occasions he asked God to move a spoon, and instead God turned it into a fork right in front of his eyes.
Wow.
Evidently, which I thought was just funny because God failed. All you wanted him to do was move your spoon, and he gave you a fork. That's no good for soup. Turned it into a fork right in front of his eyes. Hey, we're hearing us back through here. So who's this?
This is Nick from Germany, no headset, so this may or may not work.
Okay, Nick from Germany, you don't have a headset, so ask your question quick so that we don't have to hear the feedback.
Okay, we have dead air. Let's try someone else.
All right. We'll move on to somebody else.
Sorry about that, Nick.
The FSM got a little cockeyed. Oh, I could do something with that. I know there was something else. Oh, gosh. The Texas Free Thought Convention is coming up November 14th, I believe, in San Antonio. You can go to texasfreethoughtconvention.com for more information. I spoke to Paul this past week. Everything is on schedule. Looks like everybody's planning on having a lot of fun. But there have been some rumors running around the internet. People saying, oh, next year it's going to be, because the first year was in Austin, the second year it's in San Antonio. People are like, next year it's going to be in Dallas, or next year it's going to be in Houston. There have been no decisions made by the organizing committee for the Texas Free Thought Convention regarding next year's. Let's get this year's over with, have a good time, meet Vic Stinger, Dan Barker, and a bunch of others, and enjoy ourselves before we start worrying about, next year. We'll do that.
Cool.
Joe. Not right now, Mom's here.
Put Mom on the phone.
No. There were a couple people who emailed or wanted to get on the show who are underage.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Who are recent atheists who have either come out or were asking about coming out. Let me just say this.
Only if your mom is cool.
For the fans of the show who do this, and I get email from a lot of you saying, should I come out or not, or I came out and this is what happened. I have to be very careful about giving advice to somebody else's minor children. And while we're happy to have contact with you and hear your story, there are going to be limits, and I'm going to put 50 disclaimers on everything that I say to you. But that goes for almost anybody who calls in or emails asking for advice. You're getting the opinion of a couple of guys in Austin who may not even agree on some things, so it's good to get other opinions. But what you do with it is kind of at your own risk, because it's your life. And that's why I don't tell anybody, oh, no, we need you to come out, be an atheist, be outspoken. No, I do think we need more of those. I think we need more outspoken atheists.
Right, but that doesn't mean it has to be you.
Yeah.
It depends on your situation. It's your atheism. Play it the way you want.
Yeah. If it puts you in a position where your life becomes miserable, or your life or health or finances or anything else is at risk, don't do it. There's plenty of other people who can be out until it's safe for everybody.
Ready to try Nick from Germany?
We can try Nick again. Hello, Nick. Testing. No headset. I wonder if that also means no microphone. Let's just go on to somebody else.
All right.
Okay. So one of the things that I do in the little cut and paste that I send to people is please make sure that your Skype works. You can do a test call. Skype actually has a test call where you can talk and listen. And if that all works out, odds are you're probably in good shape.
Well.
Oh, a news item. The family of that young girl who prayed rather than taking her to the doctor, the one that I ranted and railed about, they've been sentenced to, I believe it's 6 months in jail and I think 10 years probation.
Yeah.
You got off light. You killed your daughter and you got off light.
Yeah, that's way uncool.
I'm glad that you got something. I'm glad that there's a court decision that where some judge has finally come out and said, I realize that you guys have a religious freedom and you can believe whatever batshit crazy idea you want to, but your freedom stops when it comes to the life of your kids. I'm glad that there's a court decision out there that says pretty much that. But you got off really light. If somebody else, if anybody had strangled your daughter, shot her, you think they'd get 6 months in jail and 10 years probation?
Starved her to death.
I don't think so. Oh, yeah, starved her to death. I don't think so. You got off light. I'm just glad you got something.
Yeah, believe what you want, but at some point you have an ethical responsibility to pay attention to what the hell is in fact actually going on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mitch from the UK.
Hey guys, how's it going there?
Cheers.
Hi, Mitch.
Hi guys. I'm just wanted to talk about something that I've been experiencing when it came to dealing with theists. I'm something of a small-time YouTube atheist, which is a bit like throwing a bottle into the ocean and expecting somebody to find it. I started a conversation with somebody in regards to the origins of human morality, and basically what his argument boiled down to was a kind of reconstruction of the argument from design, in that he stated that because everyone has an innate sense of morality that appears to be the same, by that definition he can assume that there must be somebody who designed us to be moral in that respect. And my argument towards him was that, well, no, you can't really say something like that, because for one thing, we already have sociobiology that covers areas like this and goes into studies like this. So if you want to put forward a theory like this, you've got to prove some kind of evidence beyond your own intuition of it. And essentially what happened after that was there was a very long-winded series of backwards and forwards between the two of us, where I seemed to be accused of every single fallacy under the sun in regards to the arguments I was making. He initially used, I don't know if I'm saying this right, the prima facie argument. Do you guys know what that is?
It's I don't even think that would qualify as a logical fallacy, but it just basically means you're arguing something at face value, that it is self-evident. And I would say that in this case, he's the one who's done that, and I believe you made an error in accepting his initial premise that everybody has a sense of morality and that they're the same. We know that's not the case. Morality is as varied as there are individuals and cultures, and by the way, over the course of human history, it has changed as well. So if his argument begins with that premise, then we could list the things that everyone has agreed upon in order. Let's just make a list of the things that everybody agrees has a consistent uniform moral opinion of. And when we look at that list, it's empty, which to me means that there's no God.
Yeah.
Just from his argument standpoint,
I should have put some qualifiers on this. I didn't necessarily mean all morality. We were specifically talking about the innate morality that's in the majority of humans that seems to be geared towards altruism.
Right. What we would call moral instincts, right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Kind of the nature of people, I should really say, rather than necessarily moral rules, I suppose.
Right.
Moral rules was just a label we were putting on altruistic behaviour to explain it.
Yeah.
But anyway, the upshot of it was that I told him in no uncertain terms, look, if you're going to put forward a theory, because what he was doing was essentially jumping from the idea that human beings have a sense of morality to then attaching that to the Christian God and explaining that because he has this innate sense that morality in human beings is designed, that therefore means that the Christian God is real, which to me was such a massive leap in logic. And I just found it very frustrating to talk to him about this, because any kind of for example, when I did a comparison between the argument from design for physical aspects of human beings and the argument that he was putting forward for behavioral aspects, I said they were essentially one and the same, because evolution doesn't just cover physical changes in animals; it covers behavioral changes as well.
Yes.
And he was either unable or unwilling to put forward any kind of evidence outside of his own intuition about the subject to state whether or not there was any kind of object morality, or whether or not that object morality was even correct.
Yeah, it's really hard to talk to Christians about morality, because they're starting from a basic premise that there's the inherent impulses we have that are good, that come from their God, and there are the inherent impulses we have that are bad, that come from the other guy, or a result of the fall, or whatever, you know, however the particular splinter group defines those. Whereas, a sociobiologist would say we have a body of impulses, some of which are constructive, but some of which are not, but may have been, or but would have been, survival traits when we lived in hunter-gatherer societies, millions of years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so they're all coming from the same place. I mean, I'd like to ask Christians, why did your God give us an impulse to be like so suspicious and hostile towards strangers?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
it's part of the same package.
Another aspect of this, and I don't want to make too many assumptions about what this person believes, but if they're going to try and argue that because we have some shared moral instincts or some shared moral views, that therefore there must be an author for this, first of all, that's a bold assertion. But second of all, that he's identified that this author is the Christian God, then I'd wonder what his position is on the Bible, which nobody would have any idea about this Christian God if it weren't for this book. And yet when you look at the book, the moral values that are advocated in that book, they certainly don't mirror my moral views, and I don't think they mirror the morality of the majority of people, that majority that he'd like to use. I think the majority of the people are opposed to slavery. The Bible's not. I think the majority of people find substitutionary atonement reprehensible. If I wrong somebody, Jeff shouldn't be able to just, go in and say he's sorry and make everything okay. I have a responsibility for my actions and to make restitution for my wrongs.
Exactly. I agree 100% with you, and that's one of the reasons why I actually, when people ask me my opinion of Christianity, I'm not particularly glowing of it for that exact reason, the whole idea of vicarious redemption.
Right. So the one thing though is that when I like to distill it to a list again. I mean, my first one was an empty set, but if you distill the second list of moral values presented in the Bible or traditionally in Christianity that by and large people would accept as good, you get very, very, very simple things like don't murder, don't steal, don't lie, and they're incredibly simple both in their wording and execution, but by and large, well, so what? How many other religions have had those same ideas within them? And how many other non-religious philosophies, worldviews have had those? And why would anybody suppose that we'd need some divine author to say, hey, I don't like it when somebody kills me or takes my stuff, so let's just not do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was the crux of the counter-argument I did after we'd had the initial discussion, when I explained the necessity for morality in human beings as a species. I kind of suffixed that when I explained it by adding the stipulation that there's absolutely nothing to state that having morality as a subjective truth necessarily either makes it as an objective truth, I should say, either makes it subjectively true for you or makes it beneficial for you or for people around you. There was this kind of assumption during the discussion I was having with him that if morality is an illusion, as he put it, then therefore we either shouldn't follow it or it's not valid enough to warrant being called truth in any capacity whatsoever. And the point I kept trying to make to him was that, well, it doesn't really matter if somebody tells you from an outside source if something is necessarily true as a rule of the universe, so long as it works for you, and obviously it does for most of us, then there's absolutely no reason for me to give up it, just as there's exactly no reason for me tomorrow to stop having whatever hobbies that I may do simply because no one's ever told me that playing pool is a good thing. Yeah,
morality isn't an illusion, it's a strategy. Strategies are real things. You look at a situation and you figure out what is the best way to get through this, right? And what morality is when it's well thought out morality, it's an understanding of the situation you're in and a long-term strategy for getting through that to the in a way that is the best for everyone. right? Because the for everyone is part of the strategy. You can, of course, go through life saying you're just in it for yourself. There are downsides to that strategy. But the fact that it's a strategy, a way of doing things, does not make it an illusion, right? It's just that it is a approach. It's not a set of words inscribed in stone that on a list that says you must not do these things.
Yeah. It's essentially a methodology for survival of individual humans, basically.
Agreed.
Which is where it's kind
absolutely.
of brilliant. But anyway, so yeah, I won't take up too much of your time because I know you guys have got lots of calls. I'm looking forward to see you guys back in the studio, man. It's really cool. It's the first time I've ever streamed you guys and called in, so it's very exciting stuff.
Great.
Thanks for calling.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, guys. See ya.
Joe's, go ahead.
Now, it's of course complicated by what I brought up at the beginning, which is that we've evolved a natural tendency to pursue certain strategies because those promoted the survival of our ancestors.
Right.
But we are now saddled with impulses to pursue strategies that are no longer that terribly effective.
Yeah.
And that's why this is all confused, and why Christianity has broken it down and said, well, the things that don't work anymore, those are the things we're going to say you got from the bad guy. And the stuff that still works, that's the stuff we're going to say came from the good guy.
Except that they did this thousands of years ago, and we've learned stuff since then.
Right. Some of the stuff that they attributed to the good guy back then that may have worked, functionally then, is bad now.
Yeah,
it's a mess.
It's complicated to explain, but I don't think morality is actually difficult at all in practice and in reality.
Right.
Because as thinking individuals, we value things, not just like I value this microphone, but we have things that we care about, that we value, and we don't always value everything equally, and we don't always value everything equally at the same time. In much the same way that the US dollar value of this microphone is going to fluctuate, and it also depends on, for example, if the guy next door is wanting to do a podcast and needs it today, right now, that changes the value of it. But there's still some value, which could be nil, for this microphone. We base this moral strategy on a really complex weighing and estimation of values in comparison to other things, and it changes at different times. And what does this mean to me versus what does this mean to the group that I'm in versus what does it mean to the bigger group that I'm in? And sometimes we make the right decisions and sometimes we don't. But what we do is, I'd say, progress. Dennis has this idea, which convinced me, that there is, in some sense, a moral absolute in the spectrum of possible actions for any given situation. Some of them are better and some of them are worse. So there is an action or a set of actions that represent the best possible actions for that particular situation, and that would be as close to we can come to a moral absolute. The hope is that we're progressing towards that or something like that. And I think by and large we are. We recognize...
Right. It's like there's a best opening move in chess.
Yeah.
There is.
E4.
It's not an illusion, right? It's true. But it is something
Possibly.
that people discovered. Okay, am I getting into deep chess theory here?
Chess is not a solved game.
Let's pretend that that's
tic-tac-toe.
True. It's like that. Okay, great. There's a best opening move in tic-tac-toe.
Yeah. Right?
It's not an illusion. It's true, but it's also not inscribed in stone anywhere. It emerges from the rules of chess, from the description of the situation you're in. From tic-tac-toe. It emerges from the description of the rules of tic-tac-toe automatically. So.
Exactly.
Sarah from Canada, the one who emailed us.
Sarah from Canada who emailed about being on the show. You there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
We
Hi,
can
Sarah.
hear you. Joe's probably going to have to turn it up a little bit. Go ahead.
Okay. First time caller and first time watching the stream. A bit nervous, but really excited to get to talk to you guys.
Well, welcome. You wouldn't be nervous if you could see the rest of the room.
I decided to actually call in because I saw a video where I think it was Jen and Russell were talking about why there were so few African Americans at your meetings. I'm from Canada, and
So is
I'm
that
of color. I don't.
African
Sorry.
Canadians then?
Yeah, black's fine. I mean, I'm
Okay.
multiracial, but to make it simple, I'll call it black.
All
It's
right.
fine.
I'm multiracial too. It's just that all of mine were lighter skinned.
Yeah, there you
I'd say
go.
we're all
Exactly. I agree. I can't talk about the African American experience, obviously, but I thought maybe I would call in so at least one of quote unquote us is counted, at least in the atheist voice, if that makes any sense.
Please do.
I just wanted to. I love the show, and I love especially the information that you guys put out about getting the definitions clear about what it precisely means to be an atheist, and the difference between agnosticism and atheism. And the first thing I wanted to do is just share a really quick way that I like to try to explain what it means to be an atheist, functionally or practically, to people who maybe have a negative connotation of what it means.
Sure.
I usually just describe it as an atheist is somebody who believes that all of the arguments that have been presented to date that are in support of theism have been satisfactorily refuted.
Yep, we lost your audio.
Oh, hello? Hello?
There you are. You're back.
Oh, sorry. I don't know.
No, we lost you again.
Hello?
Nothing.
I wonder if you've got your Skype set up to automatically adjust volume levels on your mic.
No, it was working. I did the test call and it was working.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I'm sorry. The mic is cutting out. We can hear you, and then it gets so quiet that we can't hear you anymore.
Should I maybe try to speak louder? Would that help?
You can try.
Okay, I'll try to speak louder, but you can cut me off because I don't want to waste you guys' time if it doesn't work out. Okay, so I'll keep going.
Okay.
Just the definition that I usually give to people is that an atheist is somebody who believes that all of the arguments in support of theism that have been presented to date have all been satisfactorily refuted using evidence, logic, and rationality. And the reason I like saying it that way is that it again explains that atheism is a response to theism. It's not its own belief system or religion or anything like that. And it also means that it doesn't require an absolute certainty about anything. It means that of the arguments that have been presented, they've been refuted. So if somebody comes up with another argument in the future that has evidence, we'll analyze it and see if it makes any sense using the rules of logic and reason.
I'm going to object in the nicest possible sense.
Sure, yeah.
I'd actually change that because by saying that all the arguments that are presented for theism have been refuted, first of all, I don't think that's true, but it also inadvertently shifts the burden of proof. In fact, the situation is that the arguments that are presented for theism have been unconvincing and have not been sufficient to justify the case. Because what you're doing there, by saying that all the arguments for theism have been refuted, you're making this seem like somebody presented an argument for the existence of God, and we went out and demonstrated that argument is necessarily false.
And took on the burden of proof.
No, okay, that's not what I intended to say.
Yeah.
And I understand if that's how it's coming across. I suppose.
By and large, though, it's a fine definition. It's just boy, you could get kind of tricked in a conversation with somebody trying to spin the burden of proof away.
Well, yeah, no. Well, if I do have discussions with people, I make it clear that if you make a claim, generally speaking, I'll say that if you make a claim, the burden of proof is on you to support the claim. So I agree with that, and you guys say that all the time, and I think that's true. I suppose what I was trying to do, and maybe you guys can reformulate it in a way because you have more experience. What I was trying to do was address the criticism that sometimes atheists get that we are stating, for instance, that there is no God, that we're making that statement, which is not what it means to be an atheist.
Right.
Or that we can demonstrate that there is no God, or that we have to be certain that there is no God. You may be certain if you're an atheist. You can choose to explain that if you like, but it's not required. All that it's required is to say that you have a lack of a belief in God. So perhaps I should have prefaced it with all of those kind of, caveats to
Yeah.
make it clear that that the burden of proof isn't on the person who's
I personally try to address that by saying that I only call myself an atheist because 95% of the time when people talk about gods, they're talking about one of the definitions that I've looked at and rejected.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But it depends what the definition of the God is.
Clearly,
some
yeah.
of those, even though it's not my responsibility to disprove them, some of them are just, inherently untenable. Like any God that's defined as having the three omnis is shot down by the problem of evil.
Right.
Just automatically, right? But on the other hand, I'm a theist with regard to some gods, right? Julius Caesar was elected god by the Roman Senate. I believe he existed.
But do you believe in his divinity?
Pardon me?
Do you accept his divinity?
Whatever it was, I accept that he existed and was called a god.
Right, but
see, it's not my responsibility. It's not my responsibility to say what divinity is. You give me some entity that is called a god and ask me if I believe in it or not. That's all I can do.
Yeah, because there are so many possible definitions.
Yeah.
I'm with you, and I'm with Jeff here in that I'd love to just be able to say, when they say Julius Caesar's a god, that's silly and stupid. He doesn't have any of the characteristics that we'd associate with a god. But by doing that, I am defining and narrowing the scope of what I'm willing to accept for the definition of God. And that can be useful in discussions. I have a book that somebody sent us the other day that specifically only addresses this type of God. And by and large, that's going to be fine. I don't run into people who suggest that, that the idea that Julius Caesar was a god, that what they meant by God was the same thing that they mean by God most of the rest of the time.
No, obviously they don't mean the same thing, but that's but presenting it that way gets me out of the position of being responsible for disproving everything. There's God claims I'll accept, right? They're just really pathetic ones, right?
Well,
it tends to be only the really pathetic ones that can withstand scrutiny.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think it's difficult when you're trying to make a catch-all definition, when the fact of the matter is, most of the time when I've had discussions about people, about God, most of the time it's been people who are Christian. So it's difficult to make a catch-all definition that will address those kind of fringe situations, when practically and functionally you're looking for some sort of a way to explain yourself to people who have a particular theistic point of view.
Right.
So, but I think you're right. I think you've pointed out that yes, there are situations in which that might not be the most appropriate.
Yeah, and I don't like to leave the Christians with the feeling that they have the right to define what a god is, either. Because then they can say, well, a god is defined as exactly the entity described in the Bible, whatever it is, right?
I'd say they have every right to define God.
Therefore, all other religions, well, they can define it for themselves.
Yes,
they can define it for themselves. They cannot take the field and say anything that doesn't fit our definition isn't a god.
The problem, though,
and they
is
try
that it happens all the time. The problem, though, is that now, because of this, you have a word, God, that is essentially meaningless because it can mean anything to anybody. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a valid argument to be made that by and large, every other word that I've used today on the show has a meaning that is generally accepted by the people who understand English. And we didn't have to dicker or squabble about it at all. I didn't have to explain to anybody what any other word that I'm using means. And so there may be a generalized colloquial God, a definition that is associated simply by as an emergent thing. This is what most people mean when they say God. Yeah. And it's absurd for somebody to say that no, when I use the word God, I mean teacup.
Yeah, but whatever it is that they mean, you need them to describe it to you before you can have an opinion about it.
Agreed.
So as annoying as it is that the word has blurred into all these different meanings, you still need to know what the individual means before you can respond about whether you believe in that particular thing or not.
Although there are some shorthands. If somebody comes and tells me that they're a Baptist, they can start talking about God, and I at least have some basic understanding of what they most likely mean by God.
Sure.
You know, I can eliminate some things.
Absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to get, thank you for that as well. I
Sure.
appreciate bouncing it off you guys because you have the experience talking with people. The other thing I wanted to bounce off you, if you have time, was I had seen a video, it might be old, where you talked about people or Christians will sometimes ask you or make the accusation that if you're a diehard atheist, despite the fact you claim to be committed to evaluating evidence and reasonably looking at evidence, that because you are so, I guess, devoted to your atheistic beliefs, that there's nothing that would convince you.
Yeah. No.
I've done some thinking about that and have come up with a kind of an answer that I wanted to bounce off you guys and see if you agreed or what you thought about it. Generally, what I say is, to get to convince me, you've said this several times, that you want to go through life with as many true beliefs as possible and as few false beliefs as possible.
Yes.
And I think to do that, what you would have to do if you're believing something on evidence is try to make the gap between what you know based on the evidence and what you don't know as small as possible. So to make a leap of faith that is as small as possible if you want to make sure that you have a true belief. And so to do that, if you look at what the Christian story, for instance, says that the disciples or the eyewitnesses, let's say, to Jesus's ministry had, compared to what modern Christians have to believe, I usually say that I'd have to start, before I could even get close to believing, with a set of demonstrated events close to what the disciples were supposed to have seen before I could even start to believe. And even then there would be a leap of faith, because if Jesus did do the things that they said he did, like walk on water, turn water into wine, and you'll know more about this because your biblical literacy is off the chart. But most of the things that he did are things that even today, if he did, we would have to call them a suspension of natural law. You can put water out for as long as you like. It's not going to spontaneously turn into wine, although I'm sure it would be great if it did, but it's not going to happen. You can't turn bread and fish, or 3 loaves and however many fish there were, into feeding the 5,000. That's not going to happen spontaneously. So if that happened, you'd have to say that the person who could demonstrate that ability was able to suspend natural law. That's not proof that they're divine, and it's not proof that they're of Yahweh, because even Yahweh admitted that there were other gods that were capable of doing feats that were suspensions of natural law, right? Like the pharaohs who were able to turn the sticks into, the pharaoh's magicians that turned the sticks into snakes. So it wouldn't be proof, but it would be a damn good start.
Yeah, it would be a start. And Martin has said that, if miracles were good enough for the Apostle Paul, then they should be good enough for me. I agree that it's absurd to think that there's a God out there who's fair-minded, who is willing to present some people with miracles out the yin-yang and present the rest of us with, you got to trust what happened to other people. That to me does not represent any sort of higher form of thinking. And by and large, even when you look at the characters as expressed in the Bible, for example, you had disciples who supposedly witnessed all these miracles, and yet and were told, led to believe that Jesus is going to die and be resurrected, and he dies and they stick him in the ground, and somebody says, "Hey, he's resurrected," and they're like, "Oh, come on." Really? Show us. I mean, and then you've got in the Old Testament, you've got the Egyptians and the Israelites who witness miracle after miracle after miracle after unbelievable stuff. The sea parts and they walk across on dry land, and they're fed manna from heaven and a pillar of fire by night and a pillar of clouds by day, and all this, and it's just wonderful. And then they get up to a mountain, and Moses goes away for a few days, and they say, screw that God, we'll make a new one. I mean, it's laughably unbelievable. So it's not just that we're not privy to the same sort of miracles that these people supposedly saw. I have no good reason to think that any of them witnessed any miracles like this at all. Everything about this points to fairy tale, mythology, And I'm sorry that this seems to offend so many people who have taken this fairy tale mythology so seriously, but that's not my problem. You know, when I figured out that, hey, you know what, that is fairy tale mythology, I stopped believing in it. It's like that they're mad at me because I don't believe in Santa Claus anymore.
They are mad at you because you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore.
If you want to see them squirm,
and I've seen him at the mall.
I sat in his lap.
If you want to see them squirm, the thing to do, I think it's Joseph Campbell who's done a lot of those studies of mythology to look for the threads, the common threads that exist between them.
Yep.
And this is going to sound a little bit malicious, and I'm not. I'm actually a really nice person, although you probably shouldn't take my word for it.
You sound like a nice person.
Oh, well, thank you. But Canadians are generally have a reputation to maintain, right? But if you want to see them squirm, what you do is you start bringing up the threads of similarity between other god myths that people think are crazy, like the Greek gods and Egyptian gods like Horus and stuff like that. Or even things like vampire culture. The idea that if vampires are all the rage now, right? And the idea that there's this connection between drinking blood and having eternal life. Does it sound familiar if you're familiar with Christian theology? The idea that you could drink somebody's blood and it would make you live forever? And somehow they think that this is like new. This concept is unique to them, that it isn't based in myth, although clearly vampires are a myth. Right, but the fact that Horus was born of a...
I've seen them on Showtime.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I will say though that you need to. I'd recommend that everybody exercise caution when they start comparing the various mythologies, looking for equivalence and similarity. We've seen this in the first third of Zeitgeist. We've seen this from Acharya S. and others, where some very unscholarly ideas are being put out there by non-Christians who've heard this and seem to think that the sources are reliable, and in some cases the claims are true and accurate and fair, and in some cases it's laughable. And so what ends up happening is that somebody who knows, somebody who happens to be a Christian but also knows history and mythology and stuff, will jump in and say, no, you were wrong here and here and here. Look how absurd they are, that they're trying to, link our true thing to these false things. So we got to be very careful.
Undermining it gives them an opportunity to undermine the valid similarities if you are not careful and present them with invalid ones.
Exactly.
Right, and I should correct. I made it seem like Horus was born of a virgin. I should say not through the birth canal. That seems to be, not to be scatological here, but that seems to be the key issue. Not so much the virgin part, but the
that they pull it out of their ass,
or the slit in the side, or feathers in bosom. Yeah. But I'm not the source to look at for them for that kind of
I wasn't making the claim that you were doing that. It's just that we get a lot of email like that, and I definitely recommend caution. And it's one of those things where I've taken, for example, Sam Harris to task as well. Right there in Letter to a Christian Nation, he makes one of his. I mean, this is a tiny little book that was intended to go to a Christian nation as, hey, here's a quick summary of what the heck we think is wrong with you. And he puts in this, well, the Bible says that pi equals 3. No, it doesn't, Sam. It doesn't even say anything like that. That is one of the worst and dumbest arguments you could have ever presented. And by doing so, what you've done is you've taken your little tiny book, and every preacher's going to say, Sam Harris says that the Bible, this is his complaint right here in this tiny little book, the Bible says pi equals 3. We know that that's not true. This is what the atheists are trying to teach your children. This is what they're trying to do to take them away from the faith. This is absurd. How dare you tolerate this? Give us some more money so we can fight it. Don't make bad arguments.
Yeah.
And if you do, correct them.
Agreed. And that's what you guys are for. Thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
I really appreciate it, and letting me bounce off the ideas off people who are much more experienced than I am. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much for your call.
Thank you very much. We got 15, 16 minutes left.
While we're waiting for the next call to go up, I'll mention that her second last issue, the charge that atheists are closed-minded, effectively, right? That
No, we're not.
That because we are committed atheists, therefore we will never agree that there's a God, no matter what evidence is shown to us. That's another advantage to my approach of breaking it down God by God and accepting gods like Caesar. I can say, look, there are gods that I believe in. They don't happen to be supernatural, but I'm open to the evidence, and those are the gods that pass the evidence test.
Yeah. It's why I started using that phrase, and others have adopted it, which is tell me what you believe and why.
Yep.
Define what you believe. That way I can make some criteria by which I could say I'm either going to accept this claim or I'm not going to accept this claim, or I'm just going to reject this claim and say you're crazy, depending on what it is. Give me that information so that I can have a basis to analyze things. I mean, to start any other way, to me, seems kind of absurd.
Yeah.
Kevis from Florida.
Kevis from Florida is on the line. Hello, Kevis?
Hello?
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Is it Kevis?
It's Kivas.
Kevis? Sorry.
Okay, I've been watching your show for about a year now, so kind of nervous, kind of shy, but I was calling for more so for two reasons. First, it was about the last episode. I was watching it, and towards the end, it was talking about black atheists. There's a couple of things I want to address with that. One thing was when one of the hosts said that the caller didn't sound black. I mean, technically, that's a prejudice comment.
Yeah.
But I'm sure he didn't mean anything by it, but I just had to put that out there because I was surprised nobody addressed that. But
it is a prejudice comment, but it's also, I think, one that's relatively fair. It would be like there are dialectical differences between different cultures, just as there are between different regions. She doesn't sound like she's from Tennessee. I think she's faking a Tennessee accent. It is wrong to assume that there's one sound that applies to a black person, but the point is that there is a certain dialect that people put on as an affectation when they're trying to sound black, the stereotypical one, the one that you hear in so much comedy. And when you hear that, then the suspicion is, okay, they don't really sound black, as they sound more like somebody who's trying to sound like a stereotypical, from comedy type black.
Yeah. And the show got letters of complaint from viewers who were upset that was not noticed earlier. So, what are you going to do? We do want to identify fake calls and be rid of them, and that means trying to make those judgment calls. So, no prejudice was intended. We're just trying to do the show.
I mean, I understand, but like I said, I just kind of wanted to bring that up.
You're right.
And another thing, there was a lot of questions about why aren't as many black people atheists and et cetera, et cetera. One thing is I learned in a sociology class, because they taught a lot about, just society in general. But one thing is that I guess because of the slave days, whatever, a lot of black people tend to be in poverty, because poverty is something that's kind of difficult to get out of. And as a lot of y'all said earlier, that people that are poor tend to be more religious. So, I mean, that's one connection. Like, say, there's a lot of different theories on different things like that that I learned in my sociology class. But the main reason I was trying to call was about church-state separation.
Okay.
One thing that I've kind of realized, a lot of times people, when they are arguing for church-state separation, they'll talk about the part of the Constitution that says Congress shall make no law, something to the effect, Congress shall make no law respecting any religion or something like that.
An establishment of religion or preventing the free exercise thereof.
Yes, but the thing I was, thinking about is that do they say anything about what the president can do? Because I know can't the president sometimes enact certain policies that would be pretty much treated as law?
Yeah. The thing is that when it says Congress shall, some people latch onto that to that phrase to say, aha, well, if the state legislature does it or the president does it, then it's not a violation. In reality, it's court precedent has been, at least to my limited understanding, and you'd have to probably talk to a lawyer, court precedent is such that we're talking about law here, not Congress. I mean, Congress was put in there as a word because that's who makes the laws. But the president couldn't do something to violate the First Amendment any more than he could own a slave, any more than he could prevent his wife from voting. All of these rights and privileges are a matter of law, and I don't think that the executive branch can simply void them and say, "Oh, look, I'm not Congress."
And and even if it could, then the question is, what was the reasoning behind prohibiting Congress from passing laws of that kind? And does that reasoning apply elsewhere? Would it be a good idea to go ahead and let everybody do whatever they wanted as long as it wasn't Congress? And I think the answer is no.
And we have the 14th Amendment, which applies all the laws that are national to the states as well. That's been a big boon, and what it does is it basically spreads the net out wide, saying that no, all of our citizens are granted these rights, these privileges, these freedoms, and have these responsibilities, and your state can't come in and just say, "Oh, nope, sorry, no atheists allowed here," or "Oh no, this is a Baptist only state," just because you're doing it at the state level and not. This was actually it was done, to make sure that the prohibitions against keeping slaves was held to every state that's part of the Union. It's what makes the United States united, essentially.
Oh, okay. Thanks for taking my call. And hi, future me, because I'm gonna watch it later. All right, bye.
All right, thanks very much for calling.
So there's is the timer on that clock right? Because
It's about 6, and so we get a late start.
yeah, because according to this, I would have 8.5 minutes. Is that what you're showing?
5:57. That'll go for 4 hours. So we can do one more if you want.
Get another caller on there. We got 8.5 minutes
We want the show to fit the time slot for replay
for the
on
TV.
TV,
If it were on some other days, I think it'd be fun just to. We're going to take calls until we drop. We're going to have an atheist telephone. We'll have a big thing up here, and you can send in donations of, buy books. I got to hit that. We talked about it yesterday briefly on Nonprofits with PC. Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron are putting out. I think now it's up to like 250,000 copies of Origin of Species that they've had printed with a new foreword that they've added to the book. Originally, what I was suggesting was that students on the campuses that they're going to be invading to hand these things out get as many copies as they can, remove the foreword, donate them to libraries, whatever. I definitely would like somebody to get me one intact with the foreword. But now, after talking to PC, I think there's a better suggestion, which is if they're coming to your campus, get yourself a copy, but also get real scientists, real biologists. Ignore the rest of the book, but have a public presentation, a reading of the foreword with commentary by real scientists.
Can we do another book that is their foreword with a new foreword, commenting on their foreword?
I'm wondering how many other books they're going to grab.
I wonder if it's copyrighted.
And, they're going to, here's the printed copy of Einstein's General Theory of Relativity, and Ray wrote a foreword for it, No. Angels, hold your feet to the ground.
Oh, boy.
But anyway, and that would have been for Newton's gravity anyway. Go ahead.
This is Justin from Belgium. This is, I can't talk moms here. Mom's out of the room.
Justin from Belgium. Belgium?
Justin? Are you there?
Hello?
Hi.
Hello.
Okay, about a week ago, when I was about 12, 11, I was forced to go to church and all that with my grandparents. I never liked it. Never a pleasant experience. I wasn't really. I think at that age it was more just because I didn't like going anywhere. But I mean, at this age, I'm 15 right now. About a week ago, I was thinking about things, and I figured I would just tell my mom I'm atheist. I mean, it wasn't because I didn't want to go to church or anything. It was just because I just think I should just tell her and get it over with as soon as possible. When I did this, she, of course, was just kind of like, "You're going to hell." I mean, I try to explain my reasoning behind it and just tell her, this is why. And then she points to the internet, the music I listen to, and all this stuff. Like, what do you do when somebody does just points at hell all the time? Like, I tell her it's an invalid threat because I don't believe in hell either. But I mean, what am I supposed to do past this point? I mean, she hasn't brought it up since, but if she does again, what should I do? I mean,
You're 15?
yeah.
Dude, you're I mean, do you really want to be in the position of, well, I mean, what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to talk your mom out of religion?
No.
Or are you just trying to get her to
what
back
it was
off?
Is
You can't get her to back
basically-
off. She's your mom.
Yeah, I know. I can't get rid of her, but
But if she's dropped it, I'd say that's a good start.
yeah, the thing is, she still talks about religious things around me. I don't like it.
I got news for you.
Yeah,
She
it's one of those
always
things
will.
where-
It's not gonna stop. Look, I'm 40.
Yep.
My parents are religious. We've just about gotten to the point where we can agree that we're just not going to discuss that with each other. We'd rather enjoy each other's company and have fun while we're together. They were down here last weekend, brought me this lovely couch, and we had a good time. We had a great time. We went out to dinner. We played Scrabble. We, talked and stuff. Religion came up exactly once when my mom asked a question, which I answered, and that was the end of it. But I've been dealing with this for years now. I mean, my parents found out, I told them 3 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, something like that. It took a long time before anything resembled normal.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but part of it is, they wouldn't want to hear about me sitting there talking about why I don't believe, or sitting there at the dinner table talking about it, any more than I want to hear them talking about religious stuff. I just.
Then that's what you say.
Yeah, I mean, when I try to explain, she asked me a few times why, what my reasoning behind it is. When I explain it to her, she just kind of says, she says, "Have you been hearing all this stuff on the internet? You're going to hell, yada yada, same stuff over and over."
Yeah, well, yeah, like we said, we're grown men with religious mothers, and they're still talking to us about it. There's no magic answer that will make a believer back off. Their belief part of their beliefs are that they have a responsibility to make sure that their loved ones also get to go to Happy Land. And as annoying as that is, I don't know exactly what your situation is. I don't know exactly where your mom is coming from. I know that my mom's motive for annoying me with religion is a friendly, positive, loving motive. She wants the best for me. And boy, I'd love to be able to convince her that she didn't have to worry. And that is, if you're interested in what my strategy is, every conversation we have about religion, all that I focus on is, she says, "Oh, believing in Jesus gives me such hope," and it's like, yeah, that's fine, Mom. I don't believe in Jesus, and I got bag loads of hope. I'm fine. I just focus on helping her not worry about me.
Yeah.
And and like I said, that's working out great because she's still talking about the religion. But you're
in a different position being a minor who's obviously still dependent on them. Yeah, I don't think that your situation is nearly as bad as you might think, and it seems to me that perhaps the best course of action for you is to just be straight up honest and say, in much the same way that you have no interest in hearing why I don't believe what you believe, I'm not interested in having you preach at me all the time. Do you think for one moment that I'm going to be convinced by preaching or somebody constantly forcing this down my throat, or in the cases of young people who said their parents wanted to force them to go to church, I said go ahead and go to church anyway and take copious notes and ask lots of questions because I think that's the best use of the time. But it was for whatever reason you believe, do you think that your God wants you to berate me about it and throw it in my face and constantly, try to shove it down my throat? I can tell you exactly what type of thing it would take for me to believe. Kind of. It depends on exactly what the claim is, as we talked about before. Taking that kind of approach and asking them that if they believe that God answers prayer and God wants to know you, that the best thing they could do instead of preaching at you or nagging you is just to pray. They'll leave you alone then. Well,
what was it that I
might.
Didn't you say at one point that you said to your folks, if God wants me to be a believer, he knows how to do it and he'll take care of it?
Yeah.
I think that's great. Right? As long as they then don't get into their heads that God picked them.
Yeah. And on that note, we got to call it a show because I think we're actually over the...
Good luck to you.
Oh, okay.
The time.
Thanks for calling. Hang in there. It's, the religion's not going away anytime soon, nor is your mom. Make the best of it and relax.
So thanks, everybody. This is the final show from Dillahunty International Studios. I'm glad Jeff was able to make it down today. We'll be in the studio downtown, just like normal, with everything working absolutely perfectly, as Joe grins, next Sunday. So we'll see you then. Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye-bye.
Hey there, brother, don't you know the guy upstairs left us years ago? So there ain't no fake except the one you make.